If a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? This question is popular amongst physicists and philosophers alike. The question I'd like to ask today is, if information is technically public, but not reasonably accessible, is it truly transparent? Good afternoon. My name is Cathryn Posey. I am the founder of Tech by Superwomen, a movement to elevate and celebrate women in technology. I'm also a business and marketing strategist. I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, where my parents encouraged all 5 of their children to get very active and involved in the political and policymaking process. And living in Alaska, which is a much smaller community, is relatively easy to do. I currently live in California. And as a result of my upbringing, I'm someone who's personally passionate about the intersection of technology, culture, and policy. Today, it is my privilege to share with you the story of OpenJudge, my hackathon team that won Code for America's first annual Data Deathmatch Hackathon this past winter. Yes, it's pretty fun. And it's a story about what becomes possible when you get the right partners involved, how you can take technically public information and really transform it into something that's actually usable, specifically using data visualization and data modeling. So first, let's talk about why. Why is it important to get involved in open government movement? And by a show of hands, how many of you have done something or been involved with open government before? Excellent. So I'm hoping at the end of this to leave you all inspired to lend your incredible skills to the open government movement. And one of the important things of why we need open government relates to the state of public trust in government, which is currently on a troubling curve. The Pew Research Center for People and Policy has been compiling research over the past 50 years that examines the state of public trust in government in the United States. In 1958, that was at 73%. By the mid-90s, we were about 44%. And currently, we're at 26%. Now, given the challenges that we face as a community and as a society, it is critical now more than ever that we get as many people participating in their government as possible. And this is where data can be the superhero. So when you look at the large body of research, it supports the fact that when we increase transparency in government, we not only increase participation, but we increase trust. And that is where the important work of the Fairness and Political Practices Commission, led by Ann Ravel, comes in. And it is this data set that OpenJudge built its applications on top of. So a little background about the Fairness and Political Practices Commission. It was founded as a part of the 1974 Political Reform Act in California. This was passed in the wake of Watergate. Talk about a time when there was not a lot of trust in government, and the California voters wanted to increase transparency and accountability in the government process. As a part of this act, the commission was formed, and California now has some of the toughest disclosure laws in the nation. But while this information is required to be disclosed, it is difficult and arduous, as I'm sure has been documented by other speakers as well, to collect that data and then to actually make it usable. So part of what the Fairness and Political Practices Commission regulates is things such as financial conflicts of interest, as well as gifts and honoraria given to publicly elected officials and to candidates. And it's collected in what's called Form 700 data, and this is ultimately the data that we used. Now, when this data is collected, it's a complicated process. The filer fills out the information, they mail in the forms, then the commission staff goes through page after page, just making sure everything's been signed and all the boxes have been checked. This isn't even getting to the underlying issue of accuracy of information. If there's information that's missing, they call the filer, try and get the correct information added. It's quite the process. Then they go through and manually redact anything that cannot be disclosed, and then scan these forms in page by page. This is a time-intensive process for their team, and once it's there, once we have these huge banks of PDFs, it's very limited in scope. It's nearly impossible to look at these forms and understand, are there donors who are giving to a network of judges? Are there people who publicly elected officials who hold stock in the same company? Those kinds of trends that would be very interesting and important for voters and informed citizens to know about. So this is where I think it's really critical when we think about moving fast and fixing things. You really need the right partners, because those of you who understand government, you know that it can be very challenging to go through the red tape and the bureaucracy to get things moving. And that is where leadership of Anne is very critical, because for her, she wanted to move fast. She was willing to innovate and find new ways to make this information accessible. So they reached out to Cathryn. Cathryn is an amazing startup that actually comes out of Code for America's accelerator program. And they decided to do a test. They paid Cathryn to digitize 1 year's worth of data, the Form 700 data from 2011. And that is where the story of Open Judge begins. On November 2nd, 2012, the weekend before the election, in downtown San Francisco, Code for America's office was buzzing with lots of community-minded technologists. We were really excited to participate in Code for America's first annual Data Deathmatch, a fun hackathon that was pitting those who are interested in hacking and building apps on top of education data against those who are interested in building and hacking apps on top of government data. In this particular case, the Fairness and Political Practices data set. I was really excited, having just recently moved from Alaska to California to participate in my first Bay Area hackathon, and I had texted my friend Kaming, who's a senior iOS developer, to join me. Given the timing, she and I were curious, could we actually pull off building an app that voters could take with them on Tuesday into the election booth and make an informed decision on judges up for re-election based on this disclosure information? But after auditing the ballot, we realized there was not a statistically significant number of judges on the ballot to make this truly useful. So we shifted gears and decided we need to come up with a bigger vision. And as our amazing Civic Geek Squad team grew, so did our mission. Our hackathon name was Team Hustle and Flow. And our vision was to try and pull as many people together on our team to build out a data visualization dashboard that would give you multiple lenses through which to understand and interpret the relationship between donors and judges. But our challenge was the data itself. So, as I'm sure has been discussed again and again, when you're dealing with data, it's often unstructured, and you have to do a lot of data wrangling, as Brian put it. And when I look back, this was probably the most time-intensive part of our process, because even though all of this data had now been digitized, if someone was filling out the form, for example, and the form allotted for 1 or 2 lines to disclose some information, and that person decided to take 3 or 4 lines or scribble in the margins, that information would be missing. It would be in different tables, it would be in different cells. So it took our team hours, and in fact, at one point, 2/3 of our team just working on cleaning and structuring this data so that we could build the back-end database which to power the app and with which to power our interactive data visualization dashboard. But once we were able to accomplish that, we moved forward with our vision. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, it's truly worth 1,000 PDFs. So our vision was to have a mobile app and a website. And on that website, we were providing you multiple ways to view this information. For example, we had a judge leaderboard in our prototype that allowed you to see the judges that had received the most gifts. You could also see who's donated the most. We had a way for you to see the most expensive gifts and what they were, as well as a weighted word cloud that would show you the frequency of the types of gifts being given. Not too unsurprisingly, meals is one of the most popular gift types that we found in this data set. On the mobile app, you could actually tweet back to the original PDF and see the actual handwriting of the person disclosing their information. So you could share out the actual gifts online. But the crown jewel of our presentation almost didn't happen. It was our D3 directed graph that allowed you to see the network of donors and judges. Because it'd been so time intensive, it was very difficult to allot the time to build this out. So we were getting very concerned that we weren't going to be able to do this interactive visualization. And I remember talking to the team, and we were like, we need something that's, as I put it, New York Times worthy, you know, beautiful, visual, and functional. And we only had an hour left. And Renee DiResta, our rock star, went into a room, called her husband, who happened to be an engineer, and between the two of them, she hacked it together in 45 minutes, making it just in time for the deadline for us to be able to present this D3 directed graph as a part of our presentation. So we did our presentation, and we won the hackathon. And part of the prize for winning this hackathon was the opportunity to head to Sacramento and present this to the commissioners, share with them what we've built. And I'd actually like to demo that for you now, if we can. We're live. Perfect. So what's amazing is part of what you're seeing is obviously you start to see a network forming here, but I think some of the most interesting data are these flowers. So you've got, you know, the red dots are judges, blue dots are donors. We've got these flowers of influence. There's one where there's almost 30 donors surrounding one judge. But one of the truly interesting outliers, which I think is not showing here, so you may have to scroll down, is you've got a red dot, a blue dot, which is a donor surrounded by multiple judges. So it's the opposite of this flower. And in that particular case, what we were curious, like, why is there one donor who's surrounded by 9 different judges? Well, it turns out, in that particular case, you're looking at an architect firm that donated a print of a courthouse to 9 different judges. And so we're telling these data stories to the commissioners, we're having an amazing time, and then something truly amazing happened. Unbeknownst to us, serendipitously, we happened to mouse over a node and found out after our presentation that one of the commissioners was very alarmed by what he saw, because what he saw was, in his case the following week in court, the opposing legal counsel's law firm had given a gift to the judge presiding over his case. And it is that kind of information that is very difficult to understand or discover when it's locked away in a file cabinet or it's in pages and pages and pages of PDFs that are not searchable and have to be poured through. And that was a really aha moment for all of us in looking at the impact that data visualization can bring, transforming technically public information to being truly transparent and useful. If we can go back to the slides. Thank you. So this story was then picked up by NPR and featured in the California report. And I think what it shows you is there's a real need for sectors in our business and our industry that have limited exposure to the benefits that technology can lend. There's a real power in data visualization providing tremendous value. And for those of us who live in technology, it can kind of get lost on us. But when you take it to local government, small government that doesn't have access to all these resources, and you apply a model of data visualization, it can have a resounding effect. So in closing, what I'm hoping to inspire you to do is to join the open government movement. You know, the White House issued an executive order saying that making open and machine readable is the new standard for government data going forward. But as we've seen, just because data is technically public does not mean it's truly useful. So I hope, as the founder of Tech by Superwomen, speaking at Data Gotham, to inspire you to tap into your inner Lois Lanes and Bruce Waynes and don your data superpowers for the greater civic good. Thank you.